Two people read the same book. One person's life changes forever. The other person forgets almost everything by next week. Two employees attend the same training program. One rapidly climbs the career ladder. The other remains exactly where they started. Two entrepreneurs listen to the same podcast. One builds a successful business. The other keeps searching for the next piece of advice. Why does this happen? Why do some people seem to learn so much faster than everyone else? Most people assume the answer is intelligence, higher IQ, better memory, natural talent. But one of the smartest investors who ever lived believes something very different. His name was Charlie Munger. And his answer might completely change how you think about learning. Charlie Munger was the longtime business partner of Warren Buffett. Together, they helped build one of the most successful investment companies in history. But Munger wasn't famous because of his memory. He wasn't famous because of his grades. He wasn't famous because he could recite facts faster than everyone else. He became famous because he understood something that most people never learn. Knowledge is not power. Connected knowledge is power. That sounds simple, but it explains why some people learn 10 times faster than others. Years ago, Munger noticed something strange. Many highly educated people made terrible decisions. They had degrees, credentials, experience, expertise. Yet they still made obvious mistakes. At the same time, some people with less formal education consistently made better decisions. This didn't make sense. If intelligence alone determined success, the smartest people should always win. But they didn't. Munger realized that information alone wasn't the answer. The difference was how people organized what they learned. Most people collect information. Very few people build frameworks. Imagine two people walking into a warehouse. The first person throws everything into random piles. Books, tools, documents, boxes. Everything gets dumped wherever there is space. The second person creates a system. Shelves, labels, categories, connections. Months later, both warehouses contain the same amount of material, but only one person can quickly find what they need. Learning works the same way. Most people consume information. They watch videos, read books, listen to podcasts, attend seminars, but they never organize what they learn. Knowledge enters their mind. Then it disappears. A few years ago, researchers discovered something interesting. People often confuse familiarity with understanding. Just because you recognize an idea doesn't mean you can use it. Think about how many times you've read something valuable. You highlight a sentence. You nod your head. You think, that's a great insight. Then a month later, you barely remember it. The problem wasn't that you didn't read it. The problem was that you never connected it to anything. Munger called this building a latticework of mental models. At first, the phrase sounds complicated. It's actually very simple. A mental model is just a way of understanding reality. Supply and demand is a mental model. Compounding is a mental model. Opportunity cost is a mental model. Incentives are a mental model. Human psychology is a mental model. The people who learn fastest don't memorize these ideas separately. They connect them. And that's where the magic happens. Imagine reading a book about investing. Most people learn investing. That's it. But someone like Charlie Munger reads the same book and sees psychology, decision-making, human behavior, risk management, incentives, probability, history. Suddenly, one lesson becomes 10 lessons. One book becomes 10 books. One experience becomes 10 experiences. This is why some people seem to learn so quickly. They're not learning more information. They're extracting more value from the same information. Think about a simple example. Two people lose money on a business project. The first person learns, I lost money. The second person learns, I misunderstood incentives. I ignored risk. I failed to test assumptions. I became overconfident. I lacked patience. I followed emotion instead of evidence. The same event, different lessons. The second person just learned 5 times more. And this happens everywhere. A failed relationship, a successful project, a negotiation, a book, a conversation, a mistake. Some people experience life. Others study life. Guess who learns faster? The challenge is that most people are trapped in what Munger called the man with a hammer problem. If the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. You see this constantly. An engineer tries to solve everything with engineering. A lawyer tries to solve everything with legal thinking. A marketer tries to solve everything with marketing. People become trapped inside their expertise, but Munger spent his life doing the opposite. He borrowed ideas from everywhere: psychology, economics, mathematics, biology, history, business, physics. He believed reality doesn't care about academic departments. Reality is connected. So understanding reality requires connected thinking. This explains another strange phenomenon: why some people read hundreds of books and still don't change. Reading alone doesn't transform people. Connection transforms people. You can read 100 books about success, but if those ideas never connect to your decisions, nothing changes. You can read one book and completely change your life if you connect the lesson to your behavior. That's the difference. And it leads to an important question: how can you actually learn faster? This is where Charlie Munger's approach becomes incredibly practical. First, stop trying to collect information. Start looking for principles. When you read a book, don't ask, "What did I learn?" Ask, "What principle explains this?" Second, connect everything. Whenever you learn something new, ask, "Where else does this apply?" If you learn about incentives in business, look for incentives in relationships. If you learn about compounding in investing, look for compounding in health. If you learn about psychology in marketing, look for psychology in leadership. Build connections. Third, learn across disciplines. Most people stay inside one box. Munger constantly escaped boxes. The wider your perspective becomes, the faster your learning accelerates. Finally, focus on decisions. Knowledge matters, but decisions matter more. Every lesson should improve future choices. Otherwise, it's just entertainment. And that might be the biggest learning mistake of all. Many people consume knowledge the same way they consume movies, for temporary enjoyment. Charlie Munger consumed knowledge as a tool. Everything he learned had a purpose. Everything he learned connected to action. Everything he learned became part of a larger framework. That's why he seemed to learn so quickly. Not because he was collecting information, because he was building a system. And maybe that's the real secret. The people who learn fastest are not necessarily the smartest. They are the people who build the strongest connections. They don't see isolated facts. They see patterns. They don't see separate lessons. They see systems. They don't just acquire knowledge. They organize it. Remember the two people from the beginning of this video? The two people who read the same book. The difference was never the book. The difference was never intelligence. The difference was never talent. The difference was what happened after the reading ended. One person closed the book. The other person connected the lesson to reality. One person consumed information. The other built understanding. And that may be the biggest difference between average learners and extraordinary learners. So here's a question worth thinking about. The next time you read a book, watch a video, or learn something new, will you simply collect another piece of information? Or will you connect it to everything else you already know? Because the speed of learning may have less to do with how much information enters your mind, and far more to do with how many connections you create once it's there. Think deeper, see clearer, learn faster.